Hey friends, I am glad you're here today on the channel again. I have a really fun project I've been working on over the past month or so. My son Ezra is about 9 years old and he had an idea. Dad, for your next project, can you make something that has a locking mechanism that's secret, where people don't really know right away how to open it up? And I said, yeah, something we've really needed as a personal family project is an end table, like a couch end table, side table. So this is the product we put together. We did some sketches, came up with a way to make it a little overly complicated, but with a nod to sushi lovers, with some maki rolls and some nigiri if you're a sushi fan. But we had a lot of fun working up this little side end table. It's an American walnut. It's got a secret mechanism that we'll get to. I'll show you that in the end of the video there. But hit like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. I love walking through projects. Let's walk through this one together. So we hit the ground running with some concept sketches. You can see the general design we had from the onset, the idea of the magnet, which we'll get to a little later on, bringing up a pin to unlock the drawer, and some ideas on some of the through tenon joinery we were working on. I had the idea of including a wedge just to help secure it, but we abandoned that later on. Working at the miter saw with some 5/4 walnut. We're making the tabletop initial cut there, and then over at the table saw we're working with 8/4 walnut also and creating those table legs. Simple table here. This will have a pedestal, base, and 2 legs coming up through the top. It'll be full mortises all the way through, tenons striking all the way through to the ground, and the same thing, full tenon through tenon all the way through the top of the table. So for that pedestal base, we'll create a 45-degree chamfered edge, a beveled edge here, just with the jigsaw. You could do this on the table saw, but we'll do it with a jigsaw here, and we'll really refine it down to give it a nice hand-worked, hand-tooled look with the hand planer here. So let's head over to the table saw and create the bottom and sides of the drawer and the carcass, the outer part of the drawer. We'll resaw this on the table saw, making a number of different passes, slowly coming up toward that middle part. We'll leave a septum in place. We'll resaw the septum with a hand tool, hand saw here. And this process is called book matching, where you fillet a piece of wood into 2 thinner pieces and put them together so the grains match beautifully. So we'll spend some time sanding before we assemble these drawers and the carcass. And we'll do a little layout work, just making sure the grain's going in the right directions, and plan the next step here of gluing these panels up. Let's spend some time using a marking gauge and marking out how we're going to set up our dovetail edging here for the edges. We'll join the side to the bottom in an unconventional manner for the outer carcass. Stock that's just a tiny bit under 9 inches, 8 7/8. So I'm just going to set up my ruler here. I could go every inch for these dovetails and pins, but I'm going to go every 1.5 inches. 3 inch, 3.5, 4.5 inch, 6 inch, 7.5, and that lands us very nicely with 9 at the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pins coming through our dovetails. I think that'll look nice. Okay.
Now, there are a number of commercial products, little guides like this, that have corresponding ratios and angle measurements noted on there. I had made a few of these for a number of projects, and I just used this inexpensive one made of some wood, and I've got it having a few different measurements. And so you'll see that 1:8 ratio there. But feel free to just use that initial guide to just help get your lines nice and straight. Otherwise, just follow along with your lines.
We're going to work up to that line we've scribed. We're definitely going to avoid going through the other side. That's how we avoid break out and chip it on the other side. Now let's just do that and switch it around. Now we go for the line.
And we'll just continue taking out each of these dovetail portions here. Then we'll jump right over and move on to the pin side of the boards. That'll be the bottom of the carcass and the bottom of the drawer.
Very good. Now we don't want that to move at all. And now what we're going to do is get right in there and make our marks.
So we'll move ahead with our coping saw here. This is set to cut on the pull. And as you insert the saw there, if you have your set like mine, when you're turning in, make sure you're pulling as you're turning in there. And be very intentional about avoiding your pins here. We've got to pivot that saw because the pins have, as you can see, a different tapered look. You're like a trapezoid. So we'll work ahead with a chisel, just removing from both sides of the drawer, the carcass here. We'll remove some of that. We're working right up to the line carefully.
So I've gone ahead and resawn 2 planks. We're going to be putting this in the front. That'll be part of the drawer on the inside here. And on the back, we're going to go ahead and submerge this piece here.
And just like with most landscape painting, the principle would be to choose to have the darker side, the heartwood, facing down and the light facing upward.
So let's go ahead and do our glue up. So for this back panel, they work absolutely just as well.
After refining a bit of those edges with the planer and some gentle sanding, we'll go ahead and work with insetting the carcass upside down here on the top, this lower larger piece of board there. That'll be the top, also in black walnut. And I've just measured and set that exactly in place where I'd like it. We're going to work with the router and route out the 3/8 inch border and inset this top in there simply with some lovely wood glue. So we're working with a plunge router here with a simple straight bit, just a small bit, make a couple of extra passes. And I've got some borders and some guides clamped in place just to ensure as I move that along the trajectory there that we are not extending past the borders of where we would like, just so it's a nice glue up with a nice semi-tight fit. So let's measure on both sides where we'll have our two legs coming out of the top here. We'll use the router to inset a bit, about 1/4 of an inch to match the depth of the tabletop that's been routed out there. And then we'll come up with a wonderfully interesting way to have this be a complete through tenon to the top, through the top of the table.
Perfect. Very lovely. I can tighten that up as we go through. I'm going to make that a complete through tenon. Mortise is going to go all the way through. But what I'm going to do is thin this, probably make a circle. Let's do the other side. Let's take a look at a quick sketch of the top and the tenon that's going to come through the top. The mortise and tenon joint. We'll have a ring around that we'll create later using some Forstner bits and hole saws. And we'll avoid putting a key through this tenon to hold it in place just to avoid splitting that delicate edge. But let's start here with the top end. We'll trace something that's about the same size as the thickness, the diameter. We want to match the thickness so we're not wasting any wood and maximizing our strength. Now we'll use a hole saw to remove outside of the circle that's drawn here. We'll double check our depth measurement for what's going to poke through there, the tenon that's going to come through the mortise. And we'll do some preparatory sawing as our hole saw comes in from the perpendicular edge. This Jizoki saw can just make sure we get a nice clean edge that's going to match up and have a nice glue up inside of the mortise on the top of the table. Now let's prepare here in the clamp. We'll use 2 sacrificial boards on the left and right just to make sure that that center leg, you can see it's coming all the way down, that's nice and in place. And then the hole saw we're using is going to extend outside of the tenon leg there. So we need to make sure that we're using some sacrificial boards. Now I've removed the pilot bit and I'm using this pre-drilled piece of wood to act as a guide. And we've measured the exact depth that we're going to be going down to with our hole saw. Now it's essential, as you can see here, that we had removed the pilot bit, which would be the central guiding drill bit. That is missing because as this tenon strikes through our tabletop, we don't want to see a hole in the middle of this. So the piece of wood guide was absolutely essential in getting this tenon without the hole in the middle. So let's head over to the drill press, and with a 1.5 inch Forstner bit with many different plunges, nice slow speed for the drill bit, we're going to plunge right through from the top down to get a nice clean edge. That 1.5 inch Forstner bit to create our mortise. The tenon that we had just created to strike through was intentionally smaller than this hole that was 1 3/16. And you can see we're slightly off. I don't want to not show my imperfections. I just didn't do a perfect job measuring. So to correct the mistake, I'll chisel away the rectangular upper portion so the entire leg will slide up a bit and the central part of the leg will strike through the center. That's a good mistake, but that's a very irritating mistake that I had made here, but I don't want to hide my mistakes from you all. Alrighty, well, let's create one of these rings. Actually, we're going to create 4 of them. I'll show you how to create one simply so we can have this look. We've got a through tenon on the left and right leg that'll be enveloped with these rings. So also at the drill press, we'll grab a piece of oak here and we'll create a lovely ring that will be sitting in between the tenon that we had created from the walnut leg, and that'll be inserted on top of that tenon,
just to create that lovely, unique look that we're going for. So we'll work with this hole saw, go about 90% of the way through the thickness of this oak. Then we'll grab a Forstner bit and we'll go through very gently from the top down just to create that perfect hole. That was a 30mm hole, and that will fit perfectly the tenon that we had created. So let's glue up these two rings that will envelope the tenons. Let's get some glue on both sides, the left and the right legs, for the tenons and the inner part. That'll help secure this and make this a bit more stable. We'll double check ourselves in all the dimensions with our largest square here and make sure those legs are rising. And we'll get them hammered in place and anchored in place and dried. After a few hours of waiting for the legs to dry, just to ensure that they're stable and in right angles to the tabletop, let's go ahead and apply some glue to the underside of the drawer carcass and to the underside of the table where this will be set from the previously routed lines there, the grooves. And then we'll just make sure this is all nice and secure, drying overnight, clamped to the edge of the workbench here. So after that's all dry, we'll flip it over and clamp it back to the tabletop. And we'll get rid of the extended portion of these tenons that are coming through the top of the table. And I'm just using a flush cut saw here just to get as close as possible to that tabletop. And just a pro tip here, you can see I'm running that saw in the direction of the grain of the primary surface. And while we've got the tabletop up and braced, let's go ahead and put a primary bevel, a nice chamfered edge all around the outer edges. Now let's shift our attention to working on the base of the table here. We're going to do full through thickness tenons. I've measured out the thickness and the width of the legs there. We're going to strike all the way through this. This is 8/4 thick walnut also. So it's 2-inch thick. And we're just going to start with a couple just simple guides with the chisel, just so when we use the router to begin our cut through, we don't have any tear out at all. So I felt like this would be easiest also just with a straight bit, the straight bit that was in there, a little 1/4-inch straight bit with the plunge router. Nice and conveniently had that ready. And we're not going to set up any perimeter barriers. We're just going to go and eyeball this nice and slowly and carefully. We've already got the edges clean because we chiseled all four of each of the corners for each of the sides of the legs here, or mortises, I'll say it that way. And shouldn't be too much of a cleanup necessary at all. And we'll make a few different passes here with the router. I'm working on both the left and the right side here. We'll start with a nice thick drill bit just as a guide. We'll hog out some of the wood material there, and then we'll use a router bit there that's going to be appropriately sized for the entryway that we're making here with the drill bit. We're going to strike all the way through, and that router bit will enter through, and we'll very carefully remove right up to the edges. So we're working here with a flush cut trim bit set all the way down. We've got the base upside down, so the previously nicely routed out, chiseled out area, that bearing there can guide it beautifully. Now make sure you're running at the right specified speed, up to specification for your router and for your flush cut trim bit. And make sure with stock this thick that you're really just being careful, holding tight, and watching for kickback. Now down at the bottom of the legs of the table, I've marked out the center line, and we're going to remove a wedge so that we can set in another wedge that will help with compressing and keeping these legs in place as they strike through the bottom mortise of the table base.
So we've made some measurements. We're going to create our drawer.
We'll head over to the miter saw and the table saw just to ensure we've got the right measurements cut out nicely to put together here our lovely drawer. And we'll do dovetail joinery in a more traditional fashion, but we'll have the dovetails visible from the front. So I measured out and cut the pins in the dovetails. The dovetails I cut on a router with a nice easy jig and hand cut the pins. And we'll head over to the router again and put a nice dado groove all the way around the inside of the four sides, and we'll just set in the bottom in place there. Now I don't want the dado groove to be visible from the outside on any of the four parts of the drawer. So we're doing a plunge cut. We're setting in place carefully, resting down in on the bit there about 1/2 inch inward. And we're going to remove the board before it reaches the end also. Alright, we got all four sides of the drawer as well as the bottom all cut and set. We did a dry fit, so let's get started on gluing up.
So I've created 2 more of these little cylinders, and one is going to simply be a visual top. One's going to hold a magnet inside there that's going to be placed over this. So, first things first, I'm just going to scribe a line here with my marking gauge, marking how deep I want this to go and be submerged into the top of my cabinet. I've got 2 little simple rare earth magnets here, and we're going to embed those into the bottom. There we go. That'll be the veneer that I put over this.
So then I'll use a little E6000 epoxy to hold these magnets in place.
I'll just tell you how fun that was. That was fun. We're going to use a little screw here, and this will be what acts as our pin that allows the drawer to be open and closed. When in rest, it'll just rest inside the tip of the drawer. So I'm going to snip the tip of this right off here. We're done. Alright, so I marked our middle here, and I've designed this very simple little block that will sit here, right in the center. And since our pin is submerged well in past where our lip is, ideally we'd have a hole here for the pin to sit. But this is what this cute little piece of wood's going to serve.
So we'll go ahead and glue that and clamp it right in place and let it dry.
See how far down that allows us to come here. Will it allow the drawer to lock? Let's go ahead and drop it in.
And for full transparency here, I did end up going ahead and making a second pin that'll drop down just a little deeper, just for a little more secure latch to hold that drawer in place until the magnet rises it up. So let's clamp in place a guide here for our Forstner bit, just to make sure we're getting a perfect placement. And we'll come in with that Forstner bit of that same dimension as before to create a little hole that will hold the key that will have the magnet inside that. So this simply acts as a place to store the little key rather than losing it.
We're going to be doing the entire top in 320.
So let's start creating the little handle, the pull handle that will look a little like a piece of nigiri sushi. Ideally a band saw would have been the choice. I don't have a band saw in my shop. So what I did was just take a jigsaw to it and then make sure it's a square cut at the router here. I love the more that I sculpt this, the more it looks like a piece of nigiri. That gradation from dark to light wood's going to be super pretty for this handle, I think. There's our pull. Teeny bit of refining, teeny bit more sanding. So after some refining of this, we'll go ahead and glue the handle in place and clamp it and let that dry for a few hours. So after everything's dry, we'll go ahead and do a quick test run, make sure the magnet sets in place, pulls up the pin, and unlocks the drawer. Perfect. So switching over to the back side of our table here, let's add some lovely bow ties to add a little security to the back and make it look a little more lovely like the front does. Now click the link above here to see my process of creating these little bow ties quickly. After completely sanding all the surfaces up to 150 or 180 grit sandpaper, we're going to vacuum off the surfaces and wipe them down. Let's go ahead and wipe them down completely with acetone, just a generic cleanser. And then we'll get ready for the Oil Plus 2C by Rubio Monocoat for a final finish. So Rubio Monocoat, the Oil Plus 2C here, it comes in two parts. It's an absolutely killer finish. It's a hard wax oil. You mix 3 parts of the main container here with the hardener, 3:1 ratio. So 9 milliliters of the oil and 3 milliliters of the hardener, or the accelerator. So I like to apply the Monocoat with a white scrubby pad and let it soak in for 15 minutes or so, making sure all the surfaces are equally absorbing, and then you scrub it in with a red scrubby pad as well. As final step, go in the direction of the grain again with the white, making sure it's soaked. And after that 15 minutes is soaked in, just wipe it off with a nice lint-free cloth. So you can add a second optional coat just for a little more durability and to increase the sheen a bit. So there's a Sheen Plus product by the Rubio Monocoat line. And that is also a 2-part product.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this adventure and in this video here, guys. It was an absolute blast to build this project. And don't forget to hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you like content like this, and stay tuned for some future content. Happy building, guys.